Imagine this. You're lying in bed, eyes wide open, staring into the darkness as shadows dance across the walls. You hear it, the faint sound of something shifting in the corner. Is it a trick of the mind? Or something else lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting? Darkness has always had an eerie grip on our minds. Something about the night, the absence of light, stirs a primal fear buried deep within us. Maybe it's because we can't see what lies beyond, or maybe it's because something ancient within us remembers what it's like to be prey. Every culture, every generation has its own stories about what may dwell in the shadows, waiting to strike when we're at our most vulnerable. Tonight, we'll dive into the tales of things that emerge when the world goes dark. Creatures, spirits, and entities you'd be wise to avoid when the night descends. From chilling folklore to real-life encounters, let's uncover 5 of the most terrifying beings you'd never want to meet in the dead of night. Number 1. The Humming Lady of the Hollow Woods. There's a chilling legend in a small town nestled at the edge of the Hollow Woods, a dense forest where daylight barely filters through even in the brightest hours. Locals speak of the Humming Lady, a ghostly figure who appears only on moonless nights. Those who venture too close report a strange melody, soft and hypnotic, floating on the wind. One late autumn evening, a hunter named Caleb found himself caught in the Hollow Woods after dark. He hadn't meant to stay so late, but he'd lost track of time, drawn in by the thrill of the hunt. As he made his way back, he heard it, a soft, almost enchanting hum. At first, he thought it might be the wind, but the melody had a rhythm, a haunting tune that stirred something cold within him. Ignoring the pit forming in his stomach, Caleb picked up his pace. Yet, the hum seemed to follow, growing louder with each step. He swore he felt eyes on him, but every time he turned, there was nothing but darkness and the faint rustling of leaves. The hum became unbearable, filling his head, as if it were coming from within his own mind. Then, just as he felt the weight of unseen hands pressing against his shoulders, everything went silent. Caleb staggered out of the woods that night, pale and trembling, and never went back. The Humming Lady's song had changed him, left him hollowed out, as though she'd taken a piece of him to keep her company in the eternal dark. Number 2. The Eyes in the Cornfield. Out in the rural Midwest, there's a story parents tell their children to keep them from wandering the fields at night. They call it the eyes in the cornfield. Farmers say that if you look closely, you'll see 2 glowing eyes staring back at you from the dense rows of corn, watching, waiting for you to stray from the path. Eli, a young farmhand, thought it was all just a tall tale, until he saw them himself one late summer night. He'd been out repairing a fence under the fading twilight when he noticed something strange. Between the rows of corn, not 20 feet away, were 2 glowing eyes, staring right at him. He called out, thinking it might be a stray animal. But the eyes didn't move. They didn't blink. They only watched him, unblinking, unyielding. Eli felt an icy dread seep into his bones. He took a step back, then another, but the eyes stayed fixed on him, following his every movement. Then, he heard a low whisper, so close it seemed to come from his own ear. "Come closer." Frozen, Eli felt a pull, as though something invisible were drawing him toward the field. He fought against it with every ounce of strength, breaking into a run without looking back. To this day, he swears he still sees those eyes sometimes, glowing in his nightmares, urging him to return to the cornfield under the cover of darkness. Number 3. The Red-Eyed Watcher. In a remote village in Eastern Europe, there's a tale of a creature known as the Red-Eyed Watcher. It's said that if you're outside past midnight, you might catch sight of 2 fiery red eyes staring at you from the treetops. The Watcher, they say, can only be seen in the darkest part of night, and it chooses its victims carefully. One night, a villager named Mira was returning from a late gathering when she felt an overwhelming urge to look up. There, nestled among the branches of an ancient oak tree, were 2 glowing, blood-red eyes. They pierced through the darkness, locking onto her with an intensity that froze her in place. As she stood paralyzed, she felt her body grow colder, her breath shallow. The eyes seemed to pull her in, draining her will to move, to fight. She couldn't look away no matter how hard she tried. The legend claims that the Watcher can steal a person's soul with a mere gaze, leaving them as hollow shells wandering the village aimlessly. Myra's friends found her the next morning, standing at the edge of the village, eyes vacant and her once bright personality snuffed out. She never spoke again, only stared blankly, as if part of her was still locked in that midnight gaze with the red-eyed Watcher. Number 4. The Weeping Man in the Garden. Many towns have stories of a haunted house or an eerie landmark, but in a suburban neighborhood in northern England, it's the garden at the edge of a park that people avoid. They call it the Garden of the Weeping Man. The legend says that if you walk too close, you'll hear the soft, guttural sobs of a man, weeping into the night. A teenager named Liam heard the story from a friend and decided to investigate. He slipped out one night, armed with his phone flashlight, and walked to the garden. It was just after midnight, the park empty and quiet, when he heard it, the unmistakable sound of someone crying. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, but curiosity got the better of him. He approached slowly, heart pounding, his light shaking in his hands. The sobbing grew louder, desperate, as if coming from a man lost in his own sorrow. Then suddenly it stopped. Liam strained his eyes in the dark, catching sight of a figure crouched among the overgrown flowers. The man was pale, his eyes hollow, and as he lifted his head, Liam saw that his face was twisted in agony, streams of black tears flowing down his cheeks. Before Liam could scream, the figure let out a wail so piercing it echoed through the night, sending Liam running, never to return. They say the weeping man is the spirit of a heartbroken soul, eternally mourning, waiting to lure others into his grief. Number 5. The Shadow on the Road. In the deserts of the American Southwest, there's an eerie road known simply as Route 666. The locals warn travelers never to drive down this road alone at night, lest they encounter the shadow on the road. They say that this entity has no true form, appearing only as a silhouette that slinks along the edge of the road, mirroring your movements and feeding off your fear. One summer night, a driver named Cassie found herself on Route 666, her car's headlights barely piercing the inky darkness. The drive was quiet, almost too quiet, until she noticed a figure in her rearview mirror. A shadowy, indistinct form pacing her car, just barely visible in the dim light. At first, she thought it was a trick of her mind, but as she sped up, so did the shadow. She could feel its gaze on her, an oppressive presence that filled the car, chilling her to the bone. Panicked, she pressed down on the gas, heart racing, trying to outrun whatever was following her. The shadow followed, growing larger and closer, until it seemed to engulf her entire car. In a last, desperate effort, she swerved off the road, narrowly avoiding a fatal crash. When she looked back, the shadow was gone, vanished into the desert night. They say that those who meet the shadow on the road are marked, destined to live with the memory of that dark presence, and to one day return to Route 666. Darkness has always been the realm of the unknown, of creatures and entities that lurk just beyond the reach of light. Each of these stories, from the humming lady to the shadow on the road, reminds us of the ancient primal fear that the night can stir within us. It's a fear that transcends cultures, ages, and reason. A reminder that some things are better left unseen, unheard, and untouched. So what about you? Have you ever felt the eerie touch of fear in the dark? Maybe heard a strange sound in the stillness of night? Share your own chilling stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this dive into the darkest corners of our fears, be sure to check out our other videos on haunted places, mysterious creatures, and the paranormal. Until next time, remember to stay safe, and perhaps keep a light on.